All right, so in this video, I'm gonna show you exactly what countries to hire virtual assistants from, really for any role, either within your business or a client's business for about $4 to $8 or $9 an hour. And this can include roles for admin, operations, marketing, sales, anything that you could possibly think of. I'm gonna break down the 4 main areas that I personally hire from, some pros and cons to each area, and at the end of this video, you should have a very good grasp on where to get started and where to look and what country to go to for the specific requirement that you have. If you haven't watched the channel before, my name's Chris. I have a virtual assistant agency. This is the 3rd business that I've created and scaled to multiple 7 figures. I'm in the process of scaling us to 8 figures right now, and I'm documenting everything that I'm doing in order to build that business. Also, if you'd like to start your own virtual assistant agency, there's some information in the description about how to do so. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into the 4 areas that I hire most of my talent from. And let's start here with the most popular area really in the entire world for hiring virtual assistants. And for most people, this is the country that really comes to mind when you say the term virtual assistant. So why this country out of all the countries in the world, with there being so many? There's really a couple of criteria that make this like the hot spot for outsourcing and for hiring people to work online. And I'm gonna walk you through them right now. So the first one is that they have excellent English. Many of the people that I've personally hired had told me that when they were going through school as little kids, if they didn't order their lunch in English, they weren't allowed to eat lunch. So they're forced to speak English. So there's an abundance of college educated individuals who have fully fluent English, and many of them actually undergo US accent training. So if they work in a call center, that's incredibly common. So what's really cool is you can hire people that not only have excellent English, but they also have neutralized their accents proactively. So they can sound better if you're putting them on the phone talking to clients or handling phone calls, whatever they might be doing. The next thing that's great is that there's a lot of American cultural influence in this country because the US actually occupied this country for a period of time. And when that happened, the US left a lot of their culture behind, and as a result, they just integrate really well into American businesses, and they tend to be more westernized, really in terms of like personal communication and then also just basic business practices. So that's another really good one. The next one is that the BPO industry is the biggest part of their entire economy. That stands for business process outsourcing. So you're gonna think of roles like call centers, there's a ton of call centers there, accounting. I know people that have started entire bookkeeping businesses offering the service to US customers by hiring people here. Recruiting is another big one. I've hired a ton of people that came from healthcare staffing. So they are helping US companies hire doctors and nurses and different healthcare technicians, and then really anything back office related. They're mainly going to be in repetitive roles here. I actually went and visited them back in July of 2025, and driving around the Capitol, I saw a lot of really tall office buildings with thousands of people in them, with well-known American brands on there, like American Express, for example. The next thing that's obviously great and that makes this work for virtual assistants is that the cost is really low. The cost of living is a lot lower than the US, so you can hire people over here really starting at like $500 a month to work 40 hours a week, all the way up to about $1,500 a month, depending on the role that you need to fill. Okay, moving on down, here are 2 criteria that you have to really check the box for no matter what country you're hiring people from, and that's high-speed internet and stable power. If they don't have those 2 things, and if you can't confirm that they have those 2, you want to hire people with at least an internet speed of 30 Mbps. But you'll notice there's a lot of people in this country in particular with like 100 plus or faster. So not a problem to find people with high-speed internet here. It's incredibly common. A lot of them will actually have fiber optic internet, which makes it even faster and more stable. And then the power grid is stable. They do have power outages, but you just want to make sure that when you're screening the applicants, that they have a backup power source, for example, a power generator. But for the most part, you're not going to have a lot of issues in this country. And that's what really makes it the #1 VA market. It's all of these things that I just mentioned: the excellent English, the American cultural overlap, the fact that they're already working for American companies in their BPO industry, it's low cost, and they have high-speed internet and stable power. And that makes it a great recipe for hiring people to work from home for your company or your client's company. In this country, I've found I was able to fill roles the fastest. There's a lot of qualified applicants, and there's a lot of people in general that are aware of the virtual assistant industry that are going and proactively looking for these jobs. Unlike other countries where this trend of working online for Western business owners is a little bit newer and people are just like starting to get used to it, it is like already full speed ahead here in their economy, and all of them, especially after COVID, want to ditch their in-person jobs and work online. So that's a huge pro of this particular country. These are all the pros that I mentioned. You can find people really fast. Now, a couple of cons, probably more so I should call this challenges, depending on how you look at it, is that their communication tends to be a little bit more challenging, at least in my experience. So they tend to be more shy, reserved, they don't like confrontation. And if you're running a company solely with people like this, then it can be a little tricky. So what I typically recommend is that you're going to hire these individuals for a lot of support roles. So mainly the repetitive roles. Think like anything that's a little more mindless and repetitive that doesn't really require a lot of critical thinking. This tends to be a little on the lower side. I'm generalizing, but it holds true from a generalization. You'll find outliers, you'll find people with good critical thinking, but for the most part, let's say like 95% are gonna have not the best critical thinking. And it's not even really their fault because they're used to doing all this really repetitive stuff, and that's kind of like how their minds have been trained. But overall, great market, great people. I have a ton of very loyal people from that country that I've hired, and I've met them in person. They're amazing, love them. So next up, let's go ahead and talk about the next region, which is in the Middle East and has a much different culture. So what I've noticed with them is that you have excellent English. You have a lot of English universities, like from the UK, that are there. So you have some really good universities, and as a result, that goes back into having great English fluency. It's one of the lowest cost major cities in the world to live in. As a result, you don't really have to pay that much, and the rates are pretty much on par with the first country that I went over. Here, you'll find a much different culture. So if you remember what I said over here, we're going to find a lot of people that are shy. They're reserved. They don't like confrontation. Over here, you're going to find it's like almost the polar opposite, I'd say. Someone let me know if I'm wrong. This is how I see things, but I've noticed that they're very assertive and they're very confident to the point where I'm like, this is interesting. Like, I want to be as confident as them. Like, what's going on in their heads culturally to make them this confident? I need to absorb some of that for myself. And then you're also going to get a lot of good technical talent. So those are a lot of the things that I like. And then some things that, again, they're not really cons. They're probably more so like challenges, is that they need a little bit more stimulation. And again, that's not a bad thing. It just means that if you're gonna go and hire for a repetitive role, you might experience some more turnover or just people that are more antsy. Okay, next up, let's go into my personal favorite, which is Latin America. Now, Latin America obviously is composed of Central America and South America. There's a lot of countries. The ones that I tend to focus on the most are these right here, and with the bulk of them really coming from those two. And this country's great. Obviously, it's neighboring the US, so you've got a lot of American influence. Here, this is a really good country for a lot of roles. I've hired a lot of sales reps, a lot of customer success. So like if you sign up for my virtual assistant service, you'll probably work with someone here up until you hire your VA. You can find a lot of really great engineers and architects, which is interesting. And this country in particular has an absolute abundance of those. So there's a ton of people there. This is another great country. People hire a lot of marketers from this country. Some of the pros, let's go over. So obviously they speak Spanish. If you have a customer base or your client has a customer base that's Spanish speaking, hire someone from one of these countries. They operate in US time zones, so they're either on Central or Eastern Standard Time. Some people will argue that's a benefit. It could kind of be a neutral, because while over here these countries are not aligned with the US, you'll find that there are literally thousands of people that are already used to working what's called the graveyard shift, which means nighttime, and they're already adjusted as far as time zones go. But sometimes I'll run into clients who they had a bad experience or something happened, and like they just want to stick to US time zone. So that could be a pro for some people. They are very strong communicators. As a result, can be good for sales or client-facing roles because their critical thinking is really good most of the time. So unlike the individuals that are doing the repetitive roles who lack critical thinking, whenever you put someone in front of your clients, you better make sure they've got good critical thinking. Otherwise, your client might not be too happy. So that's what makes them really well suited for the sales and client-facing roles. Then they're not going to be able to work for you consistently without interruptions. Some cons, not necessarily a con, just kind of is what it is, but potentially a con, slightly higher costs. So let's say it costs like 50% more than the other two countries I mentioned. Still on like a total dollar amount per month or per year, who cares? It's not really that much. And then again, kind of similar to the country I mentioned before, might struggle in some of those more repetitive roles, but really just depends on the individual. All right, last but not least, this is the country that I've been hiring a lot of people from recently, largely because they have native English. There's many people from Europe, specifically the Netherlands, that settled this country a long time ago. So there's a big European demographic here, and as a result, they grow up speaking English. And it's going to be different than the other countries who may have grown up speaking English because this is their first language, and they're going to have the strongest English. You don't need to worry about English fluency in the other countries. You'll find plenty of people with fluent English, but it's always going to be the best here. And then again, that makes them really great for sales and client-facing roles because they're going to have the best communication, and that's absolutely critical when you're doing sales. Another good thing that most people like is that they've got some really cool accents. They sound like kind of English or Australian. The cons to this country, cons and challenges, are that it's going to be the highest cost, and let's call it like 1.5 to 2 times higher depending on the role. So it can be a little bit more costly, but still, I mean, you're looking at probably starting rates of this amount per month all the way up to like maybe this amount for more sophisticated people. But the average to find some really competent people that are going to do a great job is this much right here. And again, remember when I'm quoting you guys these amounts, just remember it's 40 hours a week. So typically it's going to be like an 8 to 5 Monday to Friday. So still not very much, $1,700 a month. So one of the other challenges here is that it can be pretty tough to find competency plus high-speed internet plus power. So you'll need to do a lot more screening here because it's hard to find those things all in one candidate, but then also you're going to get a ton of applicants, okay? So it can be very time intensive to source from this country, but although it takes a little bit longer to find people and there's some more heavy lifting to do so, you can hire people that have the native English, they've got the good accents, they look really good in front of your clients. And if you're running a virtual assistant agency and you offer this kind of talent, there's really no one else that does that. The vast majority of the companies that are in the virtual assistant space are here. This is all they're providing to their clients, and most of the companies are actually based here. Very little do this area. There's some of them. I don't think there's any that I've seen that focus on this area. And one other thing I forgot to mention about this place is that they have a ton of call centers and there's some really good talent there. And then they're also excellent, like very, very good for cold calling and appointment setting. So you could even start an entire business just providing that service. And again, there's some companies that provide VAs from here. I've never seen a single one here. So if you can find this talent, you're going to be able to charge a premium. People will absolutely love the native English, and they're going to love the accents and the critical thinking and just like the Westernization of the VAs and how similar to Americans that they are, that you're going to be able to separate yourself from all the other VA companies out there. All right, so there you have it. There are the main areas that I personally hire virtual assistants from, and I've hired someone to do every single role within my company. I don't have anyone in my company that's in the US. My entire sales team is outside the US. I have appointment setters, I have cold callers, I have marketing people, I have operations people, customer service, recruiters, team leaders, literally everything from A to Z be, any role you could think of, I've hired someone for in one of these areas. Now, if you'd like to start your own virtual assistant agency, I've actually launched my own community where you get to work one-on-one with me, and I help you build a VA agency completely from scratch. Now, you don't need any experience. You get to work from home online. You don't even need any money to get started. All you need is some basic information. And with my help, I'm going to get you more than well equipped to be able to go out and start contacting clients and selling these services for a lot of money. So if that's something that you're interested in and you want to start your own virtual assistant agency, check out the description. There's some more information there. Make sure to leave a comment with any questions you have or any topics you'd like me to make more videos on. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.